Welcome to You Know Me, a podcast for Brunswick and the Golden Isles. I'm Buddha.
I'm the Beard.
So, Beard, it's Saturday.
It is.
We haven't done a Saturday one in a while.
I know, it's been a while.
It's been a good week, and I got to tell you that I'm really excited about this guest we have.
Yes.
Because one thing I love is art. And yourself, tell everyone a little bit about you.
All right. Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I grew up on St. Catherine's Island, moved out there with my dad and very brave mother when I was about 18 months old. St. Catherine's, for those of you that don't know, is it's an island not far from here. It's in Liberty County, and it's completely private and completely wild. It's not like Gilligan's Island, but not like St. Simon's. There's phones and Wi-Fi now. We got phones when I was 9. And there's water and AC and all of that. The island is mostly for research and conservation. So growing up, there was more or less myself and my family, but researchers would come and stay periodically. Archaeologists, biologists, all the ologists came to visit. So I grew up in that environment. Mostly I wanted to be on the island, but I did have to ride the boat to school every now and then, like all the school days, unless it was really foggy. So I grew up with wildlife, but I also grew up telling stories and hearing other people's stories. And the best part was telling stories, when we would all sit around and eat, like hopefully faded towards pottery, favorite things like alligators and marsh and birds and fish and shells. And that would get passed around the table. I also paint on, anything that'll hold still. Boards, bags, in anything. Denim jackets, jeans. But I do enjoy art and the art of storytelling. So this is exciting to me, this podcast.
So your art is your way of telling stories.
Yes, sir.
And what were some of the stories that you heard around the dinner table?
It could be anything. My dad could have told us a story about a bird sighting. Nothing more than exciting or less exciting than a bird that hadn't been on the island. Like I remember when spoonbills started coming back to St. Catherine's. Their range is going up a little bit further north, so they're now in South Georgia. So that was a story. Or it might be a story that we were all involved in of catching the alligator that had left footprints in the road the night before, and it was out on a walkabout because we were during a drought. And so this alligator, we didn't really want walking through the compound where people lived and lemurs ran around and the dogs were loose. So the alligator was found, and they would often, after they lassoed the alligator's mouth and duct taped it, because then you could pull the lasso off when you retrieved it, they would have us kids sit on it because we were lighter and we would hurt the alligator less. And then they would tag the alligator. They had a little system of tagging, and it's actually a piercing system, so it's some sort of strange math. And then they would release the alligator. So it could be this elaborate story of when the alligator hissed and sitting on the alligator. And we named it, I had to name all the things. So this was Dragon that we sat on, and Dragon was moved into the back of the trailer, and then Dragon was moved to Windmill Pond, and then Dragon was released, where he was probably happier with more water, and we were happier not to have him in the front of the yard.
Before we talk about the alligator, I want to go back to lemurs. There's lemurs on the island?
There are lemurs on St. Catherine's. Years ago, the Duke Primate Center wanted to study if lemurs raised in captivity could be rehabbed. So we got all these kind of couch potato lemurs. All these lemurs came to St. Catherine's. This probably would have been when I was still in high school or maybe even middle school. And they would walk out and be lost. They were released, but they always came back to get food. I mean, so it's a soft release. They have food, they have flea control, they have, checkups. But they were there and they were pretty helpless. They would go behind a tree and be completely lost. They wouldn't think to call, and they had no warning call system, and they didn't forage. But in very short amount of time, they started foraging. They lost weight. They had a hierarchy. It's a matriarchal system, which I approve of. And they did rehab. They found that we can take these lemurs back that we've rescued from a bad situation in Madagascar, and then a couple of generations they've lived in a zoo and they get a little soft, they can go back. They can learn. They just need a little bit of a soft release. And so there are still a few troops of lemurs that are on the same system. They are fed, they are regularly taken care of. They are not a wild animal, but they do roam freely. They're just the ringtails now.
Wow, I did not know that. That's really kind of cool.
It is. It's very magical to be out and about and stop so the lemurs can cross the road.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect that.
Yeah, I mean, I've known
we don't touch them, interact with them. We let them
be.
Let them be for our health and theirs. But we've never had any issues with them.
I know there's an island in South Carolina or North Carolina where it's all monkeys.
Yes, I heard about that one. Yeah, and then the alligator, which I find because I lived out in Hilton Head for a while, and you can spit and hit an alligator.
Yes,
you don't see that many alligators around here, but
on St. Catharines, wildlife comes first. If something crosses the road, you stop. If the animal is in your way, you wait. If the alligator is living near you, well, then you need to avoid the alligator. Wildlife was first. Conservation was first. The ologies were first. But obviously at this point, the animal could be unharmed and moved and even learned from, with the tagging and the charting him grow. But he was a very big alligator. So he was sort of a safety issue. But again, he wasn't eliminated. He was taken to a better pond. Yeah.
I see that because I'm with you on the conservation. I've had the pleasure of traveling cross country and seeing all these beautiful national parks and going through Yellowstone, Yosemite, and the Grand Canyon. I can list them all. And I did that for about 2.5 months by myself when I was young enough to do it.
That sounds like an adventure.
It was great. But it just, there's so many beautiful things. And I got to see a lot of wild animals when I was in that. So it's like, and I've always been kind of a animal person, nature person, and I really see the importance of have that conservatism and kind of keeping our waterways, our forests, our the wildlife
absolutely
healthy and thriving.
Well, and there's so much to learn in a place like St. Catharines that you can't anywhere else. There's research that can be done on the oysters. There's research that can be done on bird populations. There's research that can be done. The list goes on and on and on, more than I can even think of. I mean, there's been a lot of tick research done on St. Catharines, which helps all of us. We learn about tick-borne diseases. We learn about how the waterways affect the different things that we eat. So because of the wild environment and because of the work of the St. Catharines Island Foundation. So if you wanted to do work on St. Catharines, you would have your grant proposal. You would probably be from a school, and they've been in relationship with the Museum of Natural History in New York. Students, they bring their food, but then St. Catharines provides them with room and laundry and Wi-Fi and air conditioning and a place to cook so that they can, for several months at a time, be there on this dig. So it's when I say St. Catharines is dedicated to research and conservation, they are participating. They are making this space is not available for tours. It's not available to just cold call, but it is available for things like that. If they want the people that are doing the work that need St. Catharines to be on St. Catharines, and they want to help facilitate that. So you could be on St. Catharines and you could have a place to be for a duration. And they have several programs that do this. There's a field school with the University of the South. There's the program with Museum of Natural History that I spoke about before. So there are different programs that are on rotation. There's the Georgia Sea Turtle program that has interns and has a director that's out of Georgia Southern, and they do that every year. So again, the animals are wild but also helped. The water table is low in Georgia because of industry, and so several of the ponds on St. Catharines, they are in a place where a pond would occur naturally, but St. Catharines Foundation has gone to the effort to tap the well. So when the pond runs low because of not enough water table, not enough rain, we can fill it up. And so then you create an entire rookery for wading bird. You know, you create the whole system. Then you have the wading birds and you have the alligators that keep the raccoons out. But you have this whole system that is wild, but we're helping. You know, St. Catherine's
Right.
is helping. And so I liked growing up and catching things. But the ologists got to catch things, and the birds in the mist net, and the alligators for the research. So though I was grabbing birds or grabbing deer or catching, we weren't going to harm them, well, you know. But they probably didn't enjoy the experience. But I just thought that was the most fun thing in the world, was to catch things. And a lot of my fun memories are just being able to do that. No one was going. I learned about what snakes were venomous, and I learned about where not to go in the summer because you could get into an alligator. But animals are very predictable. I was never in danger from humans, but I had to know what to do and not do in a different way than someone that was growing up in a city would have to know to do and not
Right.
Right.
do. So.
And then you have these, are some of these artwork that you brought with us, some of the tales from St. Catherine's?
So I have, this is a print of a painting called Mullet Jumping. And I actually have this one. This is my whole family in a boat. So I was told that we were going to go mullet jumping. I didn't know what this was, but we knew that us kids and my siblings and I knew we got to go out in the boat at night. So that was pretty good. But we went out in the boat at night and we rode around in the waterways and we shined flashlights. It's all, you go when there's no moon and you shine flashlights into the water. And there's bioluminescence in the water, but just barely. This is all shades of blue and shades of dark and shades of green, which is what you see in the painting. But then mullets see the light and they go after the bugs and they go after the light and they literally leap into the boat. And it sounds like I'm making this up, but they leap into the boat. They hit you in the side of the head. They are like bullets. They fill up the boat. They fill up the floor of it.
Oh my gosh.
And you laugh and you squeal and it's like a fairy tale or a Bible story. And you get back to the dock and you literally armloads of fish. you get all I could think of is I'm going to have fried fish and grits tomorrow for breakfast, which of course is the best breakfast ever. And I went to sleep thinking of that. And I did. I got up and I ate my fill of fish and grits. But we didn't do this mullet jumping very often. Usually my dad would go out early and catch them with a cast net. We all learned to catch them with the cast net. But this experience just stayed in my mind because it was really magical.
Yeah, I mean...
and again, it's catching things. This one is simply my love of marsh and alligators, and they're arranged in a follow around each other. Usually you wouldn't see this many alligators of a celebration of color and shape. And this could also be someone else's memory of seeing an alligator in the marsh. Like this is more of a, less of just my story, but of just a marsh story, a coastal story. The same with this Consider the Birds, the spoonbills here. So this is from the Bible verse, Consider the Birds in Luke. And the idea is you see the birds and you have this, and the birds have what they need. They have the shrimp, they have the good pink color, and you know that we're all going to be taken care of. The birds are taken care of and we're taken care of too. So this could be a story that's shared. This is a story of, this is me, probably around age 11, and my dog Lizzie, who is a Brittany Spaniel, not a very big dog. And one day we were out together, not far from the house. We call the area where the buildings were on St. King. Me was not watching Lizzie, my dog. And I noticed this, so I would tilt and I would take a step, but not enough to scare it, just enough to have it keep its eye. And it would tilt. You could tell it knew something else was going on. It would tilt its head, and it would look. But then I would move, and it would focus back on me till Lizzie got close enough to bite it on the hind leg. Tackle this deer in the marsh. And then I'm like concerned about its tiny little boo-boo on the back leg. So I don't want to leave it until it can be properly treated. So I wedge one knee into each hip of the deer, and I pulled off a sweatshirt and put it over its eyes because that seemed like a good idea to keep it calm. And it did. It calmed right down. And I proceeded to go, Daddy, at the top of my lungs until someone radioed my father and told him there's someone in the river screaming Daddy. And so my father goes, oh, Lord, where you hear the sound? And he goes, okay, that's not in the river. And I know which child's fine. And to let it off of it. And Lizzie and I went on our way, and the deer gave a very dark look to my father, who really, the poor man, had not been involved, and then decided to walk off and go about its business. So it had a busy afternoon.
So how old is this piece?
I've had this piece, well, I have a 21-year-old and 18-year-old now, and I know I made this piece before I had children. So maybe 30 years.
Wow.
I've been carrying it around. Oh, that probably dates me a little bit.
I'll be that close to a deer. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yes. And I did catch a few piglets in my day. We were looking for a Christmas tree one year. And I had caught myself this smooth green snake, which is the color of those green anoles. And it's only about as big around as a pinky. It's a lovely little snake, and you can carry it around. It really won't bite you. They're very docile. So I was very tickled that I get to look for a Christmas tree, and I got to hold this snake. Well, then I spotted 2 piglets. And so the poor snake was tossed over into the grass. And I run and I catch piglet number 1. And I toss it to my sister.
Oh my God.
Now, when my father tells this story, he says it spun like a football, but I think that might be embellishment. So I toss it to my younger sister, who was 3 years younger than me, Anna. And then I ran and grabbed the next one, and I pull it up and I tuck it under my arm, and my hand is up under its chin, and it bites clean through my thumb. Oh. So the first thing I do is cover this, because I don't want give the piglet a bad name, because I'm about to go volley for this is a good Christmas present. Like we'll just pivot, go to Dad, and I'm like, can we keep it? Can we keep one of them? Where both of us are like, can we keep the piglets? Can we keep the piglets? Which of course my father is like, no, you can't keep the piglets. It's a terrible. Put it down before its mom shows up. And then he notices there's a little bit of blood on my hand, and he goes, did that piglet bite you? And I'm like, that's really not the point. Can we keep it? So, but we did not keep the piglets, which would have been a terrible idea. They're an environmental menace, and so keeping piglets was not an option. And piglets were managed on St. Catherine. Pigs were managed on St. Catherine's.
But
these piglets ran off. These were wild pigs.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, wild pigs.
Yeah, not domesticated pigs. Big difference.
Big difference. Very, very wild pigs. I remember one was black and one was the one with the white shoulder strap. But,
yeah, one of the most invasive species in the United States.
Very invasive, and it's not one of the nicer things to talk about in conservation. But yes, they were controlled and managed to the best of ability. A wild pig can have babies about every 4 months, and they can have up to a dozen.
Yeah.
So it is a constant battle, because they are predators for the sea turtle nest. They'll dig them up. Once it's a learned behavior, so once they learn to do it, you can sometimes manage those pigs on the beach, and then you won't have a reoccurrence for a long time, because they have to figure this out.
Yeah, you could have a whole podcast on wild pigs.
You could, but it would not be good.
No, it would not.
No,
especially
they get kind of dark.
They do. It does get kind of dark.
I know, like out in
because
Texas.
pigs are a very intelligent animal, and it's. I don't think anybody in that conservation takes any joy in the process. But there's a checks and balances, and unfortunately, we don't have a predator to do that except us.
Yeah. When did you start painting, or?
I've always drawn little crayon stories. I remember drawing stories of like my mom walking the dogs, or my dad fishing, or little stories. My father read to us. The earliest book I remember being read was The Chronicles of Narnia, so it would have been Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when I was maybe 5. And he read those books to me, and then I reread them when I was, a third grader, I guess. But he read us stories at the dinner table. I think he was trying to tell us how to be without telling us how to be. He read us the Chronicles of Narnia. He read us the Tolkien stories with The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. He read us Shane, Old Man and the Sea, The Secret Garden, just books about how to be, how to see the world. Right. And I'll say that sometimes when I'm being generous and graceful, when someone is acting a way that I don't like, I'll say, well, we just have to remember somebody probably never read them the right stories. And so stories and this, talking to each other is I'm very passionate about that. So
Now so you use a lot of clay. Is that?
Yes. So I work now predominantly. I work out of Glen Visual Arts. I'm one of the Pottery Studio members there, and I've also taught there and managed the Pottery Studio. But I've gone to working full time for Sea Island Company, so I don't do that anymore part time. I teach workshops, but it's hard to find the time with all the schedules. But yes, I work in stoneware. This early piece is in earthenware and underglazes. So underglazes have a color that's stable, whereas glazes are a chemical reaction. The underglazes can be put on bisqueware or they can be put on greenware. And bisqueware being once fired, greenware being before it's ever been fired, just dry.
Dry. Okay.
So I dip it in clear glaze, and they're pretty sturdy. I live with 2 boys, and
they survive.
They survive. For the most part, they survive. Do have a lot of serving pieces, but we eat off my plates every day. We use my cups every day, and other people's too. I've bought friends' bowls and mugs and cups. I believe in collecting art. My walls are covered in other people's art as well. My cupboards are full of other people's pottery.
Wow.
So, if you're going to be in that community, we trade, we buy, we all want to have each other's art. I value other people's art. Most of that, I realized I definitely gravitate towards birds because I have a whole wall now that's bird art of all kinds of forms: painting, woodcuts, acrylics, oils. But lots of birds.
When did you decide that pottery was kind of the medium that you wanted to use? So
there's a lot of mud in this world that we live in. So I made things out of mud. And my goal was really just to make toys. I made little mice, I made little animals that then could be fired at a campfire. Or because they would be like a terracotta pot, that kind of texture.
Okay.
That's black mud that we have fires red. It's a very iron-based clay, and once the organic is removed, it looks very much like a flower pot. And I would make these little animals and then hide them around the house because I thought that was fun, and luckily my parents thought that was fun too. So I was really just making toys, but I always did. I love china. I love flatware. I love the table, the tradition of the dinner, and everything from pulling out the best china to covering the table in beach towels so that you can beat, the crab with the back end of a knife and have blue crab, and not mess up the table. But I love all of it. The sitting around the table, the preparing the table. So I think that is how I started gravitating towards pottery, and then people that made pottery. I worked as the pottery manager at Glen Visual Arts for 6 years. And that was a wonderful opportunity to work with other potters because before that I'd had my own studio exclusively, which I still have my own kiln, but I live in a limited space, and it's nice to be in a community studio.
Yeah.
You learn a lot just by working with other people, and you can share a lot with working with other people. So I learned a lot of techniques and I learned to use a whole different clay. I was using earthenware exclusively, and now I use stoneware. And I like it better. I was demonstrating. I don't know if you can hear this, but this is earthenware.
Okay.
And this is stoneware.
Ah.
Yeah.
You hear how the stoneware has fired hotter and gone a little bit more liquid and vitrified a little bit more. It's a little sturdier. They're both very sturdy and they could be used in the kitchen, but the stoneware is a little bit tougher.
So the difference between the clay for stoneware and earthware and clay. What I love the stoneware. I love the look. It's very rustic for me, and I'm a big fan of that. But so what makes stoneware and earthware? What's the difference in the clay or what it is that you use?
They're literally made of different clay bodies, and so earthenware will melt at the temperature that stoneware fires. They have different elements within their makeup. So the chemistry of earthenware would melt into a puddle and then of course solidify at the temperature that this can be mature glaze fired, and the stoneware can be mature glaze fired. So and that's the key difference. They are different types of clay. They are no better and no worse, but they do fire at higher temperatures. They mature, I guess, is at higher temperatures.
Do they come from different regions or?
They come from regions all over the world. Most clay bodies that are used today are not exclusively from one space. They're not just dug up clay body. What they are is a mixture of dried components, silica and grit, and they irons, and they come together to make a nice, smooth, usable clay body.
Okay.
There are, you can still dig up clay. There are veins of clay, and there are different areas. The North Georgia mountains has a lot of clay, but there are clay veins in South Georgia. They're just usually very deep. We don't see them because of that whole freshwater issue again. They would be near and I have used it, but again, it's just, you can usually find earthenware where we are. You would find that, but stoneware comes from all over the country, all over the world.
Okay.
Earthenware comes from all over the world.
Isn't like around Macon there's a porcelain?
I believe there is a porcelain vein.
Yeah.
But I don't know much about. I have never worked with porcelain. I know that it gets very translucent. It's a very high fire. But so there are different veins of clay everywhere.
Wow.
So how much trial and error did it take to figure out the right temperature to kiln, glazing?
When I found underglazes, that was sort of an aha moment. I've been trying to use glazes to work in a painterly way. And when I found underglazes, I realized I could paint a very complex painting on pottery because they're very shelf stable. So, but then there was experimentation when I went from earthenware to stoneware. Stoneware will warp more because it moves more. It goes more liquid, for lack of a better word, and then solidifies. So it slumps a little bit more. And so that was a learning curve. Like, I have to really... Potters are crazy because we take pottery, and most pottery for me is like pancakes in a pan. I make at least 3 pieces of any shape and any decoration. And the third one is the one you want to eat. The first one, I figure out what I did wrong. I changed this or that. I recently made these gopher tortoise butter domes. So the dome was the gopher tortoise, and then underneath was the butter plate. But on the butter plate was an animal that would live in a gopher tortoise. So a gopher tortoise is a keystone species, and there's about 300 different species that cohabitate in their burrows. And so the plate was easy, the dome was easy, but then I had made the little pine cone handle on top of the dome. I'd made it a little too small, and I'd glazed it. So then, of course, when you have butter on your fingers and you use it, it's slippery. So then I left the cone unglazed, but the dome glazed, and so then you could pick it up. So, by half a dozen domes later, I figured out the size and the shrinkage and the everything. And so a new piece does take a lot of trial and error, and I want people to think about that when they go buy handmade pottery. You're not just paying for the piece in front of you, you're paying for the decades of messing up.
So there's a lot of trial and error that goes on with this. It's very different from painting or any other kind of medium.
It is. There's a little bit more chemistry, and things have to be technically sound. You can make a gorgeous sculpture, but if it's as thick as your fist, you can't fire it because it's going to blow up. It can't fire evenly. So the outside will cook quicker, the inside will cook less, and it'll split in half. It'll blow up. It'll damage other people's work. Wow. So you have to know how to technically make something as well as knowing how to work to make it attractive or useful.
It's almost like cooking.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's almost like baking.
It is like cooking. It is like baking, yes.
Baking, yeah.
Cooking gives us a little bit more leeway, but it's
baking
like baking.
Yeah, you do it too much, you burn it.
Too much.
It collapses on itself. Or
too hot, the cheesecake will crack.
Exactly.
That's really...
And some clays have grog or temper. And so that's kind of like when you make a meatloaf, you add rice so that the meatloaf doesn't shrink to what it would if it was just meat. So those clays are better for hand building because they have a little bit less shrinkage and a little bit less warpage. I like clay with a little bit of tooth.
Cool. This is great because I love seeing pottery. I love going to those places. I never understood the time and technical skill and knowledge that you have to develop in order to come up with a piece for people to say, "Oh, wow, that's really cool."
And throwing, which I don't do. There's this big debate if it takes 100 pots or 1,000 pots to really be good at it. I mean, people take a class and they think they're gonna, and some people are. They have a natural skill for it and they're very fast. But usually, it takes a while to get pottery done. I mean, I've been making pottery forever, but I've been working actively as a potter my entire adult life. So it takes a minute. And then there's so many avenues. I'm talking to you about 2 types of clay and the electric kiln firing process. There's wood firing, there's gas firing, there's pit firing, there's gas kilns, there's electric kilns, there's build your own kilns, there's a pit in the backyard, there's different ranges of stonewares.
Right.
There's high fire stonewares and mid fire stonewares, which is this, and then there's low fire earthenwares. So it's endless. You could, if you need a hobby where you'll never get bored and you'll spend lots of money and time, take up pottery.
And I imagine, is there a big difference? Like if I decided I wanted to make coffee cups, is there a difference between, making coffee cups and making a beautiful bowl like that?
There is. So in my case, I would make a coffee cup by hand making. I wouldn't throw it. So this bowl is laid over a form. It was laid over a form that I made in the shape of a bowl. And so it was laid over a glazed pottery. I trim it and make sure I have a template. I have a template that's a circle. Actually, I have 3 templates, just in my case. And so I can make a little juice cup, or I can make your standard mug size, or I can make a tumbler. But I have a template that looks kind of like a fan to make the sides of a cup. If you took apart your Starbucks cup, that's what my template looks like a little bit. Okay. And it's made out of that art foam, that flexi art foam, because that's sort of waterproof. And I have different circle cookie cutters, and so that's how I would build a cup. And so there are different ways to do it. Or you could throw it. But if you have upright sides like a cup, you need more of a template. You need to build it, and then you let the clay firm up a little bit before you start constructing the cup.
Okay.
Wow.
and throwing it is when you put it on the wheel. And
throwing is when you put it on the wheel. Yes,
so
sir.
like Ghost.
Because now some people thinking like
not like Ghost.
Like taking it.
Yes,
just
like Ghost. I saw a scene in a TV show, and now I can't remember the name of the TV show. And there was a pottery teacher, and I sent this meme to all my friends, because we're this kind of nerd. But the pottery teacher forbade the mention of Ghost or the playing of the song from Ghost. And that is how we all feel.
I'm sure. It's like, oh man, I can't believe, like watching that as a potter, watching that scene, but no.
Yeah. Like, she's messing up the pot.
but you can use the clay for stoneware and earthware on.
Yes.
You can throw that.
You can throw both. Absolutely.
Wow. I was always interested in pottery.
And I highly recommend taking a class. There's a couple different places in the Golden Isles where they teach class. Makers in Brunswick has pottery classes and hand building. Glenville Visual Arts has hand building and throwing. And both places also have children's pottery options. Okay. So, and I think both places have events you can plan there around art or pottery.
Sweet.
I just remember the pottery classes when I was younger, when in middle school, and you used to make like an ashtray for your parents, even though they don't smoke. Everyone's like, let's make ashtrays. Like,
because it was easy.
It was easy. It was easy.
But now we make trinket dishes.
Yeah.
Trinket dishes.
Yeah. Back then, my parents smoked, but they never used one of my ashtrays.
Well, it was too precious. It was too precious.
Right. I don't think I ever saw them again.
Yeah. My best memory of making something was a pottery. And I know it's on display in the front of the high school, like art display. They picked a few pieces, and I thought that was like the greatest moment.
It is great.
That's really cool.
I remember winning a blue ribbon for a box that I made with a lion-tailed macaque on it, and which is a type of monkey. And it was sitting on top of this box, and I had to make it where you could open the box and you could put the lid back. And I won a blue ribbon, and I thought it was just the best thing ever. I had grown up finding potsherds, and you'd find them on the beach. And they've washed out of the bank, and the archaeologist explained if the pottery is not at its actual locale, we can't learn a lot from it. So they didn't mind us picking up potsherds that we found in the surf, but they had different designs. So the Wally people, which is spelled like Wally Preserve with a G, Guale, the Wally people were kind of our Native Americans in this region. And there was a Spanish mission site found when I was a child, where the Wali were Christians, and they had this they had their village, but they also had a church, and they were Catholics. But they would make this pottery in the shape of bells, because to them the symbol of the church was more the bell than the cross. Though they had crosses and they understood the religion, I'm sure, and they went to mass. They made these bell-shaped pottery, but they would incise them. And the early pottery is very much looks like probably your ashtrays. It's made with kind of mud and Spanish moss, and they're kind of just clunky, and they're thick, and they didn't fire evenly. Well, as they got better and better, the pottery was more coil and paddle, meaning they'd make it with coils. We've all made the coil pots in elementary school pottery class, but then they would paddle the sides to meld it together, and these paddles would have designs on them, checks or carved designs, or maybe just wrapped with cord, and the pottery's named accordingly, like Deptford check. But I liked the incised pottery. And so I also make pottery with these Wali designs on it. Either I incise it or I paint the Wali design. And they're very geometrical, and it's very soothing to sit and make these repeat patterns. And I've even made some paddle pieces as well. Though I usually don't start with coil, I just paddle on my slab work. My work is it's soft slab, so I'll roll it out, and then I make it like you would using fondant. That's something probably more people are, you cut it out and you make pie dough. You cut it out the right shape, and then you lay it in the pie pan, and then when it sets up, then you work on it.
Oh,
I love how pottery has played such an important role in history.
Yes.
You know.
Well, pottery's forever.
Yeah. I mean, you have I can't speak.
archaeologists.
Thank you. I'm like tongue-tied. Like in the Middle East, and they're finding, pottery vases, pots, and just plays such an important role in history.
Well, in our region, the potters of North Georgia, if you didn't have pottery, you couldn't store food. Before everybody had refrigeration, it was literally these crocks of pottery sealed in the ground, and that was how you saved food over the winter. And so it's been important to us, even Americans. The Wali threw out old pots. So you find that's how they date middens, which middens are the piles of oyster shell. They're garbage pits, for lack of, garbage piles. So they throw out the oyster shell, but when a pot would become old, they'd throw it out too, because they just knew old pots made you sick. Well, we now know it's because they were porous. They were unglazed. They couldn't be high fired. So since they were porous, just like your flower pot that you leave out in the yard, it starts to grow things over time. So they would pots had kind of a shelf life, and they would throw them out and they'd make more pots.
Okay.
So because they used them, most of the pots are very conical, and they would set them into a fire and they would cook in the fire, bury them. But most of them didn't have very flat bottoms. They had rounded bottoms.
I love it. Love the
Oh,
history.
I mean, it's one of the oldest mediums or skills, because people, it was part of their daily life. It was something
necessary.
They needed to do and needed to have to carry water, to store food, to just about anything.
Yeah, if they were going to do any kind of cooking.
Yep. Yeah. And it's growing up in the Northeast. My dad was a big gardener, and every year we turn the soil, and we'd always find little pieces.
Always find something.
Always. It's like, how we've been doing this for 15 years. We're still.
Well, think about if someone were to come here, like if everything just stopped tomorrow and someone was to come here in 200 years, there'd be everything under their ground.
Oh yeah.
St. Catharines was covered in the same way that Manhattan is covered now, but it was in Native Americans.
Yeah.
So yes, you can't hardly turn a shovel without digging up a pile of oyster shell. My mom used to go try to garden, and between the deer and and the Wali, she was like, "Damn it!" She'd find a pile of oyster shell every time she tried to deal the garden. But that's just how it was. They were everywhere. So the oyster shell was everywhere, and they were everywhere.
Yeah, I know. Growing up on Long Island, I grew up on the North Shore of Long Island, and we had Garvey's Point, just big clay deposits on the North Shore of Long Island. So I remember that. But that was a big deal for us. We'd take out high school trips, would be out to the preserve and go out there, look for clay pots, stuff like that.
And sometimes you can use clay right off the ground, and that's what I did as a child. I just used the clay. But most clay bodies, like I've watched a lot of videos from out west, they actually find the clay dry and they crush the clay and they remove the impurities and then they rehydrate it. And this actually gets, this is a cleaner product. If you can take it down to dry and get everything out that you don't want and then rework it, it's probably easier to work with than just trying to get clay that's got sticks and raw. I mean, it's in the ground, so it's for the most part pure, but it has things in it. So
They kind of sift it out and kind of get,
they can sift it out. They can pull the things out,
wow.
make and tweak your clay body more that way. They might add different clay bodies. They might add. That's when you'd add the grog, the temper. The Wally used sand grit, like they'd find the coarse sand grit and they'd use that. Or there's some pottery that they found that even have old pots crushed and they have little potsherd temper that you can see. So
Is there something that you haven't made yet that you've been dying to make?
so many things. Right now, what's bumping around in my head is turtles and tortoises, big in the yard with their shells kind of cut open and then planting things in them. So all in the garden, there's like kind of Turtle Island myth, which is not a local myth, but it is a Native American myth where the whole world starts in the back of a turtle. And there's actually a lot of pictures, if you start Googling, of tortoises and turtles walking around with things growing on their back. But I like that imagery and making things. I've been very focused on dinnerware for a long time, and now I'm kind of going back to making more things that are just for the joy of this object, like
right.
To a planter or like the butter domes. I mean, they're useful, but they're also this fun little story of the gopher tortoise. I had this fun moment at a market in the village where this woman came and she bought one and she wanted to hear the whole story, and she'd moved here from Illinois or something. And then she came back and she's like, I have to get another one for my friend. And she's like, tell me its name again. And she wrote it all down. And she wanted to remember about this tortoise. And I thought, this is so great how she's embraced, because she'd recently moved here, and how she's embracing, and she was really excited to learn this. And you don't have, all your moments aren't like that. But it's fun to have that kind of moment where they didn't just like it because it was colorful. They liked the whole story. Yes, gopher tortoise and other tortoise and turtle planters is kind of the fun thing that's bumping around in my head. And then I also wanted to do some things where I was more wall pottery, things that were three-dimensional, but you could hang on the wall. So cutting out the story pieces and doing them all in one color as opposed to all the colors, more about the shape.
Right.
So if I were to take this mullet jumping, the people would be on there and the fish would be on there and the boat would be there, but they'd all be cut out, really thin pieces of clay, put on it, and then all glazed one color. So it'd really just be more about the texture and the shape than all the different colors.
Give them that 3D effect.
Yes, give it a 3D effect. I have for most of my, I have paper cutouts. I have paper cutouts of the motor on the boat, and then I freehand a lot of it. But so I started doing that with pottery. So I have these alligators are 3 paper cutouts.
Okay.
Actually, they're 2 paper cutouts, 2 different sizes. I have the different elements of this design with myself and the deer and Lizzie in paper cutouts. I have these spoonbills in paper cutouts. So they're a certain size, but they're all these papers. So I could rearrange them, so I'm not necessarily having to draw the whole thing from scratch. I've already got the basic outline, and then I freehand all the details.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So because I like to have unique originals, but I kind of feel like this is retelling the story over and over again. Like we all retell stories,
Yeah.
and so they're all unique. But I've painted this story. I have a platter with mullet jumping on it as well. So I have platters, I have paintings, I have sketches, I have watercolors. So I retell the story, the painting, for lack of a better word, over and over again.
So you've used a lot of different mediums, but pottery is...
Pottery is the longest medium. Well, I shouldn't say. I've always painted, but I've made my living in pottery the longest. I did that for a long time, a part-time living. Vacation and Christmas I could pay for, but so I've done pottery most publicly, but I always painted too. I'm just now more sharing that, I guess. And when you're 20 years old too, like this platter was always intended to be mine or my family's.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to tell your stories. As you get older, it's less hard. You're over yourself a little bit more. But when I was younger, it was very emotional to tell my stories,
Right.
it was hard to explain all of St. Catherine's. It was confusing to people. So I've learned better ways to say it, more succinct ways to communicate my growing up and the importance of it. I didn't fully understand how it all worked in my 20s.
No, you're right. I mean,
So I think that's why the painting has come out more recently and I love to make art every single day. It's the way some people get on their phone, or some people project, or some people garden. I love to paint. So I almost, like right now, there's a spoonbill in the marsh in progress. It's not a whole elaborate story, but I always like to have something I'm working on. And so working with paints makes that much quicker. If you work with pottery, you can't leave it for the week while you go to work. It's going to get too dry. You're going to miss that moment in the process that's separated by certain amounts of time. Sometimes you can stretch it by covering it with plastic, but the painting will be there for you. It'll just sit.
Right.
Acrylics anyway. It'll sit and you can come back and keep working on it.
Now, do you still sell any of your artwork?
I do. We're having a pottery sale at the casino building on October 12th. That'll be, I think, from 10 to 5. And I'm doing that with the Glen Visual Arts Potters.
Yeah, and that's on St. Simon's.
That's on St. Simon's, yes, sir. Oh, right near the village, right near the beach.
Yeah.
It's a great view of the beach and the big cedar
Right
tree.
by the Island Players.
Look at him players.
I sold this piece to a friend who saw it online and asked if she could buy it. I mean, I sell things off Instagram pretty regularly. People will find me. I'm Elizabeth Haven Hayes on Instagram. And they'll find me, they'll see something, they'll ask, and I'll give them a price, and they want it, they'll buy it. So some things have been ready to go, framed, mounted, hung, and other things have just been, they have to go get it framed. But yes, so I do sell work, because otherwise it would fill up my 100 square foot house.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're producing a lot.
Yes. I've gotten a little bit more precious about the pottery because I have less time to make pottery. With a full-time day job that I enjoy and provides me with all the things we need, like insurance and 401k. But
that damn
so
insurance.
I've become a little bit more. I hold on to the pottery a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I charge a little bit more, but I still sell it, and it costs more to make everything now. Just like it costs more at the grocery store, it costs a little bit more. So I've started selling more of the paintings and a little bit less of the pottery, but I do still sell both.
Do you have any on display anywhere?
Right at this moment, I'm trying to think. I don't know that I do have any on display other than in homes. So I don't have anything on display, but I'm hoping to get some things, to do better about that. To get some things at Glen Visual Arts, to get some things at Makers, to just get out there more. Try to carve out the time management. To do that. I'd like to have a show in 2026 at a gallery. I'm working towards that. And there are lots of different ways to do that. You can do that at a gallery, you can do that at a real estate office, you can do that at a church. I mean, there are lots of places that will let you have an art show. So that's good for all us artists. You don't have to necessarily be famous or, just want to get yourself out there.
Yeah. Well, I think the visitor center that's right across from, they
Yes.
do art shows there.
I did have an art show. What year was that art show? 2 years ago, in the spring at the visitor center. I've had art shows at Goodyear Cottage over on Jekyll. I've participated in more markets than I can at Goodyear and one at the visitor center, and I've had work on display in various shows shared shows at Glen Visual Arts. So it's something I've done. I've just gotten away from, again, working, trying to figure out how to be an artist and have a regular day job.
Yeah.
Just
Yes.
like trying to figure out having a full-time job and a podcast.
I know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, just got that. Like I said, that insurance.
I know,
The
the
retirement plan gets in the way.
Yes.
So do you have an inventory right now that you have at your house that you're...
I have a small inventory of paintings and pottery. I put all of it on Instagram at some point or another. Now, the pottery I'm holding back for the sale, and putting them out in the world more often. But right now, the best way to find me is really just on social media.
And we'll tag that on the
Yeah.
on the
What's the
description.
Instagram again? Say it again. Some people...
Elizabeth Haven Hayes. So that's Elizabeth, which is my first name, which I get from my grandmother and my mother. Haven is a middle name I picked out for myself when I changed my name back after I needed to change my name back, which means a safe place. And then Hayes is my last name, of course, my maiden name from my father. So got them all in there.
Oh,
And I the Instagram was for years, it was Elizabeth Pottery, and I think I'm still Elizabeth Pottery on the business, just all one word, Elizabeth Pottery. But I recently changed it to my name as an artist because I'm like, I'm more than just pottery.
Right.
I've started, Makers had a lovely get together with storytelling in the theme of the moth, which I don't know if everyone's familiar with that. The Moth is a storytelling platform that's literally teaches and tells people how to tell stories, and then people perform their stories.
Oh.
And it's not about memorizing the story. It's not about writing the story. It's about they have different techniques. So one thing they say is you should remember the beginning of your story and you should know the last line so you can stop.
Exactly.
And they had a little get together where they encourage people. It's 7 minutes or less. You tell a story. And so they did that, and that's something I'm like, oh, I like this. I like this idea of telling stories, of performing stories, as well as painting them, as well as putting them on pottery. So that's another reason I was excited about this. I was like, okay, I'm trying to do that, Elizabeth. Get out there,
Yeah.
tell your stories, because they're my stories, and they're these fun adventures. But they're also stories that could not have happened without conservation,
Right.
without people valuing, without St. Catherine's Violin Foundation, or we have so many organizations here on St. Simon's, like 100 Miles and Ash and Tilly and Coastal Wildscapes, and I could go on. But if those organizations aren't protecting the wild, beautiful native things, we can't have these experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can't even, there's a Bible verse I love, and it's in Romans, and I'm going to forget which one, but it says basically, because of the wonders of creation, no man can have any excuse. We've all been introduced to our Maker. And I condensed that in a painting to nature is the first evangelist. So literally when we cover up nature, voice. And people can have whatever, but that's my belief, is that nature is also a way that we are being shown the handiwork of our Creator, and that is a beautiful thing.
Yes.
To me, it's a beautiful thing. So.
It definitely is. I mean, we've seen some beautiful scenery here.
Yes.
The marshes, the sunset. I mean, when we did that podcast with Captain Tim and the
Yeah.
sunset that we
The
saw
marsh.
at the
That was
marsh,
beautiful.
and the picture I took was just amazing of the silhouette of the heron.
Yes.
And it's like, and I posted out there, and I got a lot of comments because it's just
so beautiful.
it's so beautiful. The colors and
So
the
beautiful. Of the coast, Georgia's barrier islands are more green than a lot. We for the most part have been good stewards. We're not perfect stewards. St. Simon's Land Trust is part of that. They're trying to literally to preserve parts of St. Simon's, even though it's not a wild island. But we have Cumberland, we have Ossiball, we have St. Catherine's. And the state is involved more or to a lesser extent on some of those islands. Little St. Simon's and St. Catherine's are private, but the others have a state. But the state, manages the turtles, and so there's a relationship there. But for the most part, Georgia allows for stewardship. We can always do better, but Georgia is protecting things. And we can see that, we can have that experience. People can't conserve if we've never given them the opportunity to care about the beauty. If they've never seen the marsh, a lot of people, their feeling is, well, why should I protect the marsh if it's not for me, if I can't even go look at it? Why should I protect our waterways if I can't, eat the oysters in them? So there is that. If we don't, we have to give people... When someone comes to your house for dinner, they don't have to lecture you that they're allergic to peanuts or that they don't like and you care about them. So you have their favorite foods. It's the same way with the world we live in. We care about it when we've seen that beautiful sunset, when we've walked on that pristine beach, when we've seen the golden aisles in the fall. Then we're like, when we've held a little sea turtle and released it on Jekyll or St. Catherine's or wherever, then we care. When we've seen that bird, then we don't want the oyster catchers to not have a place to nest because they're our oyster catchers. And so that's important. As much as we can value animals and the wild, if people, people don't have an experience in the wild, they're not going to grow up to care. So
Yes.
Absolutely. And, people who are listening or viewing, get out there and not just here, but everywhere. I mean, there's some beautiful places throughout this United States.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's beautiful places everywhere, and I'm attached to these places. I connect with these creatures. But wherever you are, there's a bird, there's a plant, there's a reptile, there's a little wiggly thing that needs your support.
Oh, yeah.
And you can go find out which one that is and which one you want to champion. There's no wrong.
Oh, no,
critter.
yeah. You go out and
Unless they're invasive.
Well, yeah. Well, then we'll just move them back to some other story.
we can go on for hours on that one. Just think about
Yeah.
what's going on in Florida. But growing up in the Northeast, you have the fall and we used to go up to New Hampshire and Maine a lot because we were skiers
Yes.
and seeing the changing of the leaf colors but in the summertime we go to Lake Winnipesaukee, New Hampshire. And when I was a kid, it was not about swimming; it was about catching the minnows. And I was going up these little streams, going up these little streams and catching the tadpoles and the frogs and having that and bringing them back.
I think catching minnows and sticking them in a jar and looking at them should really be part of everyone's childhood.
Yeah, I mean,
whether it's in a tide pool or a creek or a lake or whatever.
And I tell you, it's not easy.
No,
it's not easy.
they don't want to be caught.
They don't want to be caught, and they're fast little suckers, and they're hard to see. And then we catch the tadpoles and the frogs, but that was society in our town, small town. But it was enough.
Most places have an Audubon Society. That's another great one.
Yeah, and people should look that up, and you can become a member, and you could go up there and just walk these paths, and it was just fun to be in there because a few 100 yards away there's a bunch of houses, but right there it's nothing but trees and leaves, a little bit of pond, and quiet. And that's what I loved when I did that trip cross country. I did it by myself.
Yes.
And
So there's quiet.
I did a lot of backcountry. I was supposed to have a hiking partner who was always in the truck. I was just getting both by going out backcountry and being out there by yourself. And you appreciate the natural noises that are around. And it's just amazing. I loved it.
And it should be common sense that we all feel better, we all do better, we all are better after some time out in the wild. Whether it's really wild or whether it's just a wooded path that you can, go along the marsh trail or go along a small wooded path, or whether you're completely isolated in the wild. But they're even finding that trees emit certain things and the wood litter, like these scents actually change our brain. They make us healthier. They make us happier, and they've really just begun to realize. When we all know it, but until some scientist proves it, like
I always feel that.
But we all feel better after a walk in the woods.
Oh yeah, you
we all
feel
feel better.
energized. You feel like there's an energy in there. It's just
You feel more
Yeah.
creative. You feel more capable.
inspired and for me, I always like to look for little things like footprints or deer prints and
I have bottles upon bottles with feathers in them. So I put the feathers down inside the bottles so they can't get all dusty. So they're on top of cabinets and they're on windowsills, but I collect feathers and shells and butterfly wings and things like that. But right now the feathers are starting to take up a lot of space.
I used to do with my kids when they were really little was we do a scavenger hunt.
Yes.
And we find a green leaf, find a yellow flower, find, instead of grabbing it, we take a picture of it.
Yes, take a picture of it.
So you don't take it home with you because you leave it there. And being part of the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts, I wasn't there for the leave no trace back then, but when my son was doing it, that was starting to kind of
Catch on.
catch on about, if you're going to go hiking, if you're going to go camping out there, what you take with you into the woods or down the hiking trail is what you come back with. You leave no trace. You leave your whatever you take, you bring it back. If you're having a candy bar while you're walking, put the wrapper in your pocket and throw it out on when you leave. That kind of thing. It makes it's a huge thing, and
Yeah.
I think more people, because we love to see art. A lot of people are very into art. I think you get to appreciate it when you can see a painting of Spoonbill after you've actually seen.
Yes,
Spoonbills.
and the person that owns this original painting, that is why she wanted it like that, because she loves spoonbills. She loves spoonbills, and then she loved the Bible verse. And it's in her office, and so she has an extra window. She's where she
Yeah.
can see spoonbills, because this is a big painting. If we've seen this painting of the beach or a sunset because they want to remember that day they went and walked on the beach if they don't live here.
Right. I mean, there's plenty of places to go walk on the beach. There's Blythe Island. There's hiking trails in there
Yeah.
that my wife and I will go on. Or you can go to Jekyll and just walk up and down
Jekyll has a lot of great bike paths too.
Yep.
the bike paths.
And we do have a bike path or a pedestrian path that goes, I think, from one end of St. Simon's to the other.
Yep.
And you can pick any part of it. Now it's there's less wild. It's a little bit more nature involved on Jekyll, but it is nice. It's nice just to be out,
Yeah.
to be able to traverse to lunch in the village. I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't really feel like fall. I think tomorrow's the first day of fall,
Yeah.
but it feels a lot cooler than it has been.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely cooling off.
Fall is always my favorite season. Talking about
It's always it's too short.
yeah, and talk about changing of the leaves and the crisp air. Like I lived in Vermont for quite a number of years, and it's just something special. And you talk about the smell in the air, and it's all true because once that first leaf drops or starts changing
Changes.
color, that air it changes. It's got that crisp.
We have so
smell.
little fall color here.
Yeah.
The hickory trees turn yellow. The sassafras turn this lovely melon color, but the marsh does turn gold. We do have that fall color of the marsh. It turns gold. It goes from that electric green to that old gold.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place to live, and that's why we want to do this podcast, is to highlight everything, your artwork and everything else that's out there in the Golden Isles.
Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed being here.
No,
so
thank
much.
you. I appreciate it. Learned a lot about pottery and
Absolutely.
nature, and thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on with us. This has been
Thank
great.
you for having me.
Yeah, so thank you.